My name is Alina Price, and this is the story of how my only son tried to rob me of everything his father and I built together, how he underestimated a grieving widow, and how one meeting with a lawyer changed both our lives forever. I'm 73 years old and live in a beautiful colonial home in Richmond, Virginia. My husband Walter and I bought this house in 1978 when it was just a rundown property in need of love. We spent 45 years turning it into our dream home, renovating every room, planting the gardens, building the back porch where we'd have coffee every morning. This house isn't just a building. It's every memory of our life together, every anniversary, every Christmas morning, every quiet evening sitting together. This house is my heart. Walter passed away 8 months ago after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. He was 76 and we'd been married for 52 years. Losing him felt like losing half of myself. The first few months after his death were a blur of grief, funeral arrangements, condolence cards, and the overwhelming loneliness of a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. Our son, Gerald, is 50 years old. He's our only child. We'd wanted more, but I had complications after his birth that made it impossible. So Gerald got all our attention, all our love, and perhaps, looking back, too much of our indulgence. Walter especially had a blind spot when it came to Gerald. He wanted to give his son everything he never had growing up poor in rural Virginia. Gerald was a difficult child who became a difficult adult. He struggled in school, barely graduated high school, bounced between jobs his entire adult life. He'd been married twice, both marriages ending badly, and had 3 children from his first marriage whom he rarely saw. Walter and I helped him financially countless times over the years. Down payments on apartments he'd eventually lose, money for child support when he fell behind, loans to start businesses that always failed. Walter would always say, "He's our son, Ellie, we have to help him, he'll figure it out eventually." But Gerald never figured it out. He just kept coming back to the bank of mom and dad, expecting the vault to always be open. When Walter got sick, Gerald visited maybe 3 times in those final 6 months. He'd stay for an hour, seem uncomfortable around his dying father, and make excuses about why he had to leave. He didn't help with doctor appointments, didn't sit with me during the long hospital vigils, didn't help plan the funeral. He showed up to the funeral in jeans and a wrinkled shirt, barely spoke to anyone, and left before the reception was even half over. I was hurt but not surprised. Gerald had always been selfish. I'd accepted long ago that my son wasn't the caring, devoted child I'd once dreamed of raising, but I never imagined he'd do what he did next. About 2 weeks after the funeral, Gerald started visiting more regularly. At first, I was touched. Maybe his father's death had finally made him realize family was important. He'd stop by every few days, help with small tasks around the house, ask how I was doing. He seemed genuinely concerned about me being alone in such a big house. "Mom, are you sure you're okay here by yourself?" he'd ask. "This house is a lot to manage. What if something happens and you fall? What if you get sick?" I assured him I was fine. I had good neighbors, friends from church, my book club ladies. I wasn't helpless, but Gerald kept pushing. "I've been thinking," he said one afternoon about a month after Walter's death, "maybe it would be better if I moved in here with you, to help out. This house is way too big for one person and you're not getting any younger. What if you need help in the middle of the night?" I was surprised but appreciated the offer. "That's sweet, Gerald, but I'm managing fine. Besides, don't you have your apartment?" I could give that up, it would save me money, and I could be here to help you. He looked around the house with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Plus, it doesn't make sense for you to be rattling around in this big place alone when there's plenty of room for both of us." Something in his tone made me uncomfortable, but I dismissed it. I was still deep in grief, still trying to navigate life without Walter. I wasn't thinking clearly about much of anything. "Let me think about it," I told him. Over the next few weeks, Gerald became more insistent. He started showing up unannounced, letting himself in with the spare key he'd had since high school. I'd come home from the grocery store to find him in the house, just checking on things. He started making comments about how the house needed work, how expensive maintenance would be, how difficult it would be for me to handle everything alone. Then came the day that changed everything. I'd been at my friend Martha's house for lunch. When I came home around 3 o'clock, I found Gerald in Walter's study, a room I'd barely been able to enter since Walter died, with papers spread all over the desk. "Gerald, what are you doing?" He looked up startled, then tried to smile. "Oh, Mom, I was just going through Dad's papers, trying to help you organize everything. Estate stuff can be complicated." I walked closer and saw what he had spread out: property deeds, bank statements, insurance documents, Walter's will. How did you get into the safe? Walter had kept important documents in a small safe in his study. Only he and I knew the combination. Gerald had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I figured it out. Dad always used the same kind of passwords, birthdays, anniversaries, that sort of thing. Wasn't hard. You broke into your father's safe. I didn't break into it, Mom. I opened it. There's a difference. Someone needs to handle this stuff, and you're not exactly in a state to deal with complicated financial matters. I'm trying to help you. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. I wasn't in a state to handle things. I was just a confused old widow who needed her son to take charge. I can handle my own affairs. Gerald, please put those documents back. Mom, be reasonable. This house, Dad's accounts, the investments, it's a lot to manage. I think it would be easier if I helped you. Actually, I've been thinking maybe the best thing would be to put the house in my name, just to protect it, you know. Estate taxes can be complicated, and if something happens to you, it would be easier if the house was already in my name. You could still live here, obviously, but legally, it would be mine. I stared at my son, this 50-year-old man who was calmly suggesting I sign over my home to him. You want me to give you the house? Not give, exactly. Transfer, for your protection, for simplicity. He pulled out a document from the pile. I actually already had a lawyer draw up the paperwork. It's a simple quitclaim deed. You just sign here and everything's taken care of. He slid the document across the desk toward me with a pen. My hands were shaking, not from age or weakness, but from a growing rage I hadn't felt in decades. You had papers drawn up without talking to me. I'm talking to you now. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. You're grieving. You're alone. You need someone to make the smart decisions for you. Dad would want me to take care of you, and this is how I can do that. Your father would be horrified by what you're suggesting. Gerald's expression hardened. Dad's gone. And honestly, Mom, you're not capable of handling all this. You're 73 years old. You've never handled the finances. Dad always did that. You don't understand property taxes, estate planning, any of it. The smart thing, the safe thing, is to let me handle it. By signing over my house to you, it's the best way to protect the asset. Otherwise, when you die, the government takes a huge chunk in estate taxes. This way, it's already in my name, no taxes, no probate, simple and clean. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in his life. He wasn't concerned about my well-being. He wasn't trying to help me or protect me. He was trying to steal my house while I was vulnerable, while I was grieving, while he thought I was too weak and confused to stop him. Get out, I said quietly. Mom, get out of this house now and leave those documents, all of them. You're being ridiculous. I'm trying to help you. You're trying to rob me. You waited for your father to die, waited for me to be at my weakest, and now you're trying to trick me into signing over my home. Get out. Gerald's face twisted into something ugly. Fine. But you're making a huge mistake. You can't manage this place alone. You're going to run this property into the ground, and when you do, don't come crying to me for help. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood in Walter's study, surrounded by our private papers that Gerald had pawed through, holding that quitclaim deed he'd drawn up behind my back, and I realized I was in danger. My son was trying to steal my house, and he'd come prepared with legal documents. He'd broken into the safe, gone through private papers, had a lawyer draw up transfer documents, all of it planned and premeditated. And if he'd gone this far, he wouldn't stop just because I'd said no once. I sat down at Walter's desk and did what I should have done the moment Walter died. I called our family attorney, Robert Chen, who'd handled our affairs for 30 years. Robert, I need to see you immediately, tomorrow if possible. It's about Gerald and the house. There was a pause. Has Gerald been pressuring you about property transfers? How did you know? Another pause, longer this time. Because he called me 3 weeks ago asking about the estate, about how the house was titled, about what would happen if you transferred it to him. I told him I couldn't discuss your private affairs without your permission. Eleanor, what's he done? I told him everything, the unexpected visits, the invasion of the study, the safe, the quitclaim deed already drawn up. Don't sign anything, Robert said immediately, not without me reviewing it first. And Eleanor, I think we need to take some protective measures. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10? I'll be there. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Gerald going through Walter's papers, calculating the value of the house, seeing his inheritance as something to grab immediately rather than something he'd eventually inherit naturally. I thought about how he'd looked at me when he said I wasn't capable of handling my own affairs, with contempt, with impatience, with the cold assessment of someone looking at an obstacle to be overcome. The next morning I dressed carefully in my best suit, styled my hair, put on the pearl earrings Walter gave me for our 50th anniversary. I wanted to feel strong, competent, not like the confused old widow Gerald thought I was. Robert's office was in a historic building in downtown Richmond. I'd been there many times over the years for various legal matters. His secretary showed me in immediately. Eleanor, Robert stood and came around his desk to hug me. I'm so sorry about Walter. And I'm sorry you're dealing with this on top of your grief. Tell me the truth, Robert. Is Gerald right? Would it be smarter to transfer the house to him to avoid estate taxes? Robert sat back down and folded his hands. Absolutely not. That's either a fundamental misunderstanding of estate law or, more likely, a deliberate lie. Your estate, including the house, is well under the federal estate tax threshold. Virginia doesn't have a state estate tax. There's no tax advantage whatsoever to transferring the property now. In fact, doing so could cost you significant capital gains taxes down the line, so he was lying. Yes, and Eleanor, if you had signed that quitclaim deed, you would have literally given him the house. You'd have no ownership interest in it at all. He could sell it out from under you, force you out, do whatever he wanted. You'd have no legal recourse. The full scope of what Gerald had tried to do hit me like a wave. He was trying to steal my house. Yes, he was, and I'm very glad you didn't sign. But Eleanor, we need to take steps to protect you. Gerald's shown his hand. He's not going to stop just because you said no once. People who are willing to exploit their parents during grief don't give up easily. What do you recommend? Robert pulled out a folder he'd obviously prepared in advance. First, we need to make sure all your assets are properly protected. I want to review all your accounts, make sure Gerald isn't listed as a joint owner or beneficiary on anything that could give him access he shouldn't have. We spent the next hour going through everything. It turned out Walter, in his typical generous way, had added Gerald as a joint owner on one of our savings accounts years ago, just in case of emergency. That account had $47,000 in it. He could drain this account at any time, Robert said. Joint ownership means it's legally his money too. Remove him immediately. Robert made notes. Done. Next, I strongly recommend you update your power of attorney documents. If you become incapacitated, who makes decisions for you? I realized with horror that our old power of attorney documents, created 20 years ago, named Gerald. If I had a stroke, if I developed dementia, Gerald would have complete control over everything. We need to change that now, I said. Who should I name? Is there someone you trust completely? A friend, another family member, someone with good judgment? I thought about Martha, my best friend of 40 years. Martha was sharp, honest, and had good financial sense from her years as a bank manager. My friend Martha Sullivan. Excellent. I'll draw up new documents naming Martha as your power of attorney, both for healthcare and financial decisions. We'll also update your will. What about my will? Robert looked uncomfortable. Your current will, which Walter and you created together, leaves everything to Gerald. Given what he's attempting, you may want to reconsider that. The thought of disinheriting my only son was painful, but Robert was right. If Gerald was willing to steal from me while I was alive, he'd certainly have no qualms about taking everything the moment I died. What are my options? You could disinherit him completely. You could leave him a small amount and leave the bulk of your estate to charity or other family members. Or you could put conditions on his inheritance, leave everything in a trust that he can only access under certain circumstances, managed by a trustee who's not him. I thought about it. Despite everything, Gerald was still my son, but I couldn't reward this behavior, the trust option. If something happens to me, he gets an income from the trust, but he can't touch the principal or the house. The house goes to my grandchildren when they turn 30, and I want you as the trustee. I can do that. It's a smart solution. He'll have financial support, but he can't squander the estate, and your grandchildren, his children that he abandoned, will eventually inherit their grandfather's legacy. We spent another hour finalizing details. When I left Robert's office, I had new power of attorney documents, a new will, revised bank accounts, and a plan to protect myself. But I also knew Gerald wouldn't stop, and I was right. 3 days later, Gerald showed up at my house again. I saw him through the window and almost didn't answer the door, but I decided to face him. Mom, we need to talk, he said, pushing past me into the house. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I realize I came on too strong. But the offer still stands. I really do think it would be best if I manage the house for you. You don't have to transfer ownership if you're uncomfortable with that. Maybe just put me on the deed as a joint owner. That way we both own it, but I can handle all the maintenance and taxes and stuff. No, Gerald, Mom, be reasonable. No, the house is mine, it stays mine, and Gerald, you need to give me back the spare key. His expression darkened. I'm your son. I should have a key in case of emergencies. You broke into your father's safe, you went through private papers without permission, you tried to trick me into signing away my house, you don't get to keep a key, give it to me now. This is ridiculous. I'm trying to help you and you're treating me like a criminal. You are a criminal. What you tried to do is called elder abuse. It's illegal. Elder abuse? Jesus Christ, Mom, I'm your son trying to help you manage your affairs. You're being paranoid. Am I? You had a lawyer draw up documents to transfer my house to you without telling me. You broke into a safe. You're trying to convince me I'm too old and confused to handle my own life. That's textbook elder abuse, Gerald. He laughed, but it was an ugly sound. Good luck proving that. It's your word against mine, and you're a confused old woman who doesn't understand what's best for her. Actually, it's not just my word, it's also the word of my attorney, who has copies of the documents you had drawn up. It's the word of every person you talked to about trying to get control of my assets, and it's the word of the police if I decide to press charges. Gerald's face went red. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Give me the key, Gerald, and leave. And don't come back unless I invite you. For a moment, I thought he might actually get violent. His fists clenched and he took a step toward me, but then he seemed to think better of it. He pulled out his keyring, yanked off my house key, and threw it on the floor. Fine, you want to be alone in this big house, you want to struggle, go ahead, but don't call me when you can't handle it anymore. Don't call me when you fall and break a hip and there's no one to help you. You're making a huge mistake and I'm done trying to save you from yourself. He stormed out, and this time I locked the door behind him and put on the chain. Then I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed that same day. I gave the new keys to Martha and Robert, but not to Gerald. Over the next few months, Gerald tried several more tactics. He called repeatedly, alternating between angry accusations and tearful apologies. He showed up at my church, making a scene about how worried he was about his elderly mother living alone. He told people I was getting dementia, that I was paranoid, that I was being influenced by bad advisors, but I stood firm. With Robert's help, I'd protected my assets. With Martha's support, I had someone I trusted to help with decisions. I joined a senior advocacy group and learned I wasn't alone. Elder financial abuse is horrifyingly common, and children trying to steal from aging parents happens far more than anyone wants to admit. 6 months after Walter's death, I decided to take one more step. I called a meeting with Gerald, but this time in Robert's office on my terms with my lawyer present. Gerald showed up looking smug, clearly thinking I'd finally come to my senses and was going to sign over the property. His face fell when he walked in and saw Robert. What's he doing here? Robert is my attorney. Sit down, Gerald. We need to have a formal conversation about your behavior. My behavior? Mom, I've been trying to help you. Stop, Robert interrupted. Mr. Price, your mother has asked me to clearly communicate several facts to you. First, Mrs. Price has updated all of her estate documents. You are no longer power of attorney for health care or finances. You are no longer the primary beneficiary of her will. Her estate will now be managed by a trust with myself as trustee and your children, her grandchildren, as the ultimate beneficiaries. Gerald's face went white, then red. You're disinheriting me. After everything you tried to steal her house, Robert said flatly. You exploited her grief. You broke into private documents. You forged ahead with legal documents without her knowledge or consent. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? I'm her son, and you treated her like an obstacle to your inheritance instead of like a person deserving respect. Mrs. Price has been more than generous. She's not disinheriting you completely. You'll receive an income from the trust after her death, but you will never control the principal and you will never get this house. This is insane. Mom, you can't let him do this. I'm your only child. I'm your family. I spoke for the first time since Gerald sat down. You're my son, Gerald, but you forgot I'm still a person. You treated me like I was already dead, like this house and Walter's money were already yours for the taking. You weren't protecting me. You were robbing me. I wasn't. Yes, you were, and if you ever try anything like this again, I will press charges for elder abuse. Robert has documented everything. Do you understand? Gerald looked between us, clearly trying to calculate if there was any angle left to play. Finally, he stood up. Fine, keep your precious house. Die alone in it for all I care. Don't expect me to come running when you need help. I won't, I said quietly. Goodbye, Gerald. He left, and I haven't seen him since. He sent a bitter email on my birthday, and I heard through mutual acquaintances that he's been telling people I'm senile and turned against him. But I don't care, I'm free. That was 2 years ago. I'm now 75, still living in my beautiful home, still managing my own affairs, still sharp and independent. Martha comes over twice a week for lunch. I've traveled to places Walter and I always plan to visit. I volunteer at a senior center, helping other elderly people understand their legal rights and recognize signs of financial abuse from family members. My grandchildren, Gerald's kids, reached out to me after they turned 18 and learned what their father had tried to do. They were horrified and apologetic, even though they had nothing to apologize for. They visit regularly now, and I'm building the relationships with them that Gerald tried to prevent. They'll inherit this house someday, and they'll treasure it because they understand the love that built it. Gerald tried to take advantage of a grieving widow, thinking I was too old, too confused, too weak to fight back. He forgot that I'd been managing our household finances for 52 years while Walter focused on his career. He forgot that I'd put myself through college in the 1960s when that wasn't common for women. He forgot that I'd raised him as a single parent for months at a time while Walter traveled for work. He forgot that I was never just Walter's wife, I was always my own person. He saw a vulnerable old woman and thought he saw an easy target. He didn't see the strength that surviving 73 years gives you, the clarity that grief can bring, or the fierce protectiveness a person feels for the home they built with their life partner. My advice to any older person facing pressure from family members over property or finances: get your own lawyer, don't sign anything under pressure. Remember that love doesn't mean giving away your security, and understand that just because someone is family doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart. And if you're someone with aging parents, remember this: the inheritance isn't yours until they're gone. Their home, their money, their possessions, those belong to them until they die. Your job is to support them, not to scheme about how to get what they have. Honor them while they're alive, and maybe you'll deserve to inherit when they're gone. Walter and I built this house with our own hands and our own money. It's mine now, and it will be mine until I die. And when that day comes, it'll go to people who actually love me, not to someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between himself and his inheritance. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If this story resonated with you, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.